Welcome to this edition of XTAC Xebia Technology and Architecture podcast. I am your host Rahul Sharma, Director at Xebia Global Services. Xebia is a global IT service organization headquartered in Netherlands. We have offices across the world in Netherlands, India, UK, UAE, and USA. We help our customers in their digital transformation journeys. We work on a wide variety of technologies and architectural styles. In this podcast, we will discuss with industry experts on the latest technology trends, their use cases, best practices, and some anti-patterns. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Vikas Mittal, Global Head at Xebia Global Services. He holds two decades of experience in testing. So maybe Vikas, you can give our audience a little brief around you.
Hi everyone. Um, I hope everyone had a great festival season and celebration. Thanks, Rahul, for inviting me on your podcast. So, as you know, Rahul, my journey started almost two decades back in 2002 as a developer initially for 4 years, being a backend Java developer. In fact, in those days, it was just a developer, not no backend and front end differentiation. So we used to do everything. So I started on one of the first SaaS-based product in the industry, which was Siebel CRM on demand. Later on, went on to become Oracle CRM on demand. Moved from a dev to a test background because I wanted to see the other side of the world of how the testers actually behave or work. Went on from being a functional automation engineer to performance to security to reliability automation engineer. Graduated to lead teams, manage teams, and finally ended up being the testing head of testing for payments vertical in Fiserv, a Fortune 500 company and the leading provider of banking software companies. Then again, made another pivot in my career to move from a product background of 13 odd years to a services back company and heading up their complete testing vertical horizontal globally. Grew that vertical from around 100 people to 1,200 people in a span of 4.5 years, and from $2 million revenue to $40 million revenue globally, owning the complete P&L responsibility. In 2019, I decided to take another challenge and move to a organization which is known for agile, where the base belief was testing is a responsibility of developers, and establish a testing practice in Xebia and working with the global customers of Xebia to reinforce the fact that testing is a specialized art which requires specialized skill set.
Thanks, Vikas. I think you have a very diverse experience, started from a developer as a journey, and now you are kind of advisory to a lot of our customers and helping their journeys across agile testing. In today's podcast, we will talk about testing in agile, and for our listeners, we are going to cover the following topics. So, what does testing in agile mean today? If there are any misconceptions that we see, the role of automation testing, the challenges faced by automation testing teams, and ways to address them. So let's start. So Vikas, I have my first question to you. So you have been part of many projects in Xebia, and overall you have seen a lot of transformation journeys. And in like as you said, this we are one of the proponents of agile, and in agile, developers are kind of asked, or developers have the responsibility of putting all the kinds of tests like unit testing, integration testing in place, but still you see value from testing in agile. So what does testing in agile mean? My direct question to you is, so what does it mean today?
So, Rahul, I believe I will first address the elephant in the room, which is basically the misconceptions or the misinformation being spread about testing in agile. If you would look at LinkedIn or any other professional platform today, there are a lot of coin, coin terms being thrown around like agile testing, agile tester. Even you have companies selling a certification called certified agile tester or agile testing frameworks. What I believe, and my discussion with a lot of testing leaders globally, I think the common perception or the common thought all of us has that there is nothing called agile testing. Testing was and will always be just testing. I think agile came as an approach to help teams to collaborate and get out a shippable product as early as possible in front of the customer to get a constant feedback. But over the period of time, the people who basically end up being the proponents of agile, termed as agile coaches or scrum masters, they started enforcing their own thought process on how agile should be done. And I think from a testing perspective, if I talk about the base principle started to come through is that you should automate everything. I agree, and I'm a big proponent of automation. You should definitely automate to reduce time and effort and give the ability or the chance for your exploratory testers to test in a agile project. But you should not be automating everything because there's no sense in automating your user story based test cases. What you should be looking at to automate is your feature based test cases or your end to end user journeys. At the same time, I think you also mentioned that the developers are currently under pressure to deliver their work product, also to do multiple forms or ways of testing as part of the deliverables, because sprints enforce a definition of done that is automate. But I think you still need testers or the testing teams as part of your agile sprint teams, because developers, as we all of us know, that in spite of their best intended intentions, they always test only the happy paths, or they always limit their testing to the code base which they have changed without going into end-to-end testing of the user journeys or user scenarios, or doing a negative level of testing as well, which is required. Plus, I believe you need exploratory testers on the team, and everyone should not be a developer or a programmer. That is the reason why I say you don't need all SDETs on your team. You need exploratory testers, because the base requirement for automation is also a good set of test cases. If you eliminate exploratory testers, who is going to document those good set of test scenarios or test cases in your project? That is what I believe, Rahul, is the challenges faced in agile, or misconceptions around testing in agile.
Thanks, Vikas. So, but I completely agree with you. Like the automation is one of the key aspects of definition of done. Often, the stakeholders have the mind of automate everything. So they are kind of we are chasing that principle of automate everything. And when we start a project, so we start with a lot of kind of tools and kind of frameworks to start automation. But as we go along, we see that automation effort gets kind of subsided. So there is so initial stories you have a lot of kind of automated stuff, but as you move along, so the automation doesn't get that much amount of focus. So what is your opinion, and what are the some of the challenges in this path that we see in our kind of projects?
So, Rahul, I would basically actually agree to the point which you are making, because if you look at the World Quality Report for last 4 to 5 years, they have been conducting this survey regularly in terms of what is the automation penetration or what is the automation success rate across top 350 global organizations. And the average which comes out every year is that roughly organizations are at 40% automation level. When I say 40%, obviously there are certain projects which may be at 80%, 90%, but there are projects which have no automation also. The important aspect is not the percentage of automation you have, it is how much of it actually works. If you look at a lot of projects, they don't capture a critical metrics, which we will discuss going forward, is a first pass percentage. That how much of your automation actually works and executes successfully when you need it. And the base principle and the base challenges for this has been three. If we talk about broadly, it is the low coverage of test automation in the agile teams. Second is the non-availability of test data or test environment when the teams need it. And finally, the long running regression cycles. If you look at all these 3 points independently, why do you have long running regression cycles? Because you tend to automate everything. That means that you create your test suites, which should have been few hundred test cases automated, they balloon to become few thousand test cases automated. Because the base principles which we used to follow in our development days of defect prevention or defect prediction or impact analysis, those things are not conducted anymore by the agile teams. Those principles have somehow been left around or left back and not being followed anymore. People truly don't know what they should test when it comes to testing for a feature being inducted new or a bug fix being made. So they end up doing testing on test whatever possible you can, or relying on a gut feel or an individual's judgment without really using data which is available. The second aspect is the perennial problem of testers not having enough data or the right data when they need to test, or they end up having being forced to test on dev or integration environment because a test environment or a stable test environment is not really available. And finally, coming to the low coverage on test automation, as you rightly said, the applications are constantly evolving. The UI is changing all the time. New functionality or features are getting introduced all the time. And even today, predominantly testing is still UI focused. And a UI based automation is time consuming, not only for development but maintenance as well as execution. So the teams have to really look at the right layer to test. Plus, that as the technology has evolved, the testing tools have evolved as well. Now, for the same technology layer, you have multiple tool options available. So the teams find it really hard to decide what tool to utilize or what best aligns with their needs. And finally, with Agile, every sprint team tries to be independent, which basically is good, but it led to a lot of siloed test automation frameworks across an organization with no cross leverage, no knowledge sharing. Every team is struggling to solve their own problems and challenges. I think these are the features which contribute to what you mentioned in the question. Still low level of automation coverage, in spite of a notion, automate everything.
Sure, Vikas. So it's an eye opener that in spite of we are kind of automating everything, we still have a low overall the low level of coverage. And I kind of completely agree with you. I think there is an English proverb: if you have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So if you start automating everything, then suddenly you would kind of balloon your kind of or suit, and then it may not give you the intended value, or it may be hard to maintain. Those are the some of the challenges. So what do you recommend to teams? How do they overcome these challenges? What are some of the things that are, in your opinion, a path they can go forward to overcome these things?
I think what people need to get to is become intelligent about testing. We need to start having a more holistic approach to testing. We need to start becoming more intelligent in our selection of test cases to automate or execute. And I think the biggest thing is we need to have a value mindset. Testing and testing teams need to start measuring true value which they are delivering to a project or a team instead of focusing on traditional metrics of number of test cases documented, number of test cases executed, number of test cases pass or fail. We need to go beyond these metrics to actually contribute effectively in Agile.
Okay, so you said that we need to become holistic in testing. So what do you mean by the holistic approach to testing?
Okay. So I would define my holistic approach to testing in in a pyramid approach where the building block of the pyramid is the right use case. We should be able to identify what is the right use case to test, what is the right use case to automate. Without the selection of the right use case for testing or automation, we would end up testing the wrong way or the wrong path or automating more than what we need. So that is, I think, the base of the pyramid. The next part is, as you would have seen, Rahul, in the last probably 7 to 8 years, the technology architectures have evolved. Companies are moving away from the old way of building application of a monolithic code base to a more API driven towards now a more microservices driven or a event driven architecture. So no longer you have your business logic of the application written in the front end UIs. It has all been relegated downstream to the API or the microservices layer. But testing or the testers are still operating at the front end UI. I think the testers also need to get themselves aligned with the technology shift and start testing more and more or at the API or microservices layer, start automating more and more in the API and microservices layer, and the front-end UI testing or automation should be limited only to end-to-end user scenarios. That would help you to have better automation, more reliable automation, and faster testing cycles. The other big thing in Agile is the language and tools you utilized. I think as the applications have evolved, the technology has evolved, and the development languages have evolved. Today, you see a lot of teams developing complete application using JavaScript. Both the front end and the back end are completely written in JavaScript. Then why do testing teams have to stick to Java and Selenium for automation of a complete JavaScript technology stack? They can also leverage JavaScript based automation tools because if they leverage the same programming language for automation or testing as the developers, then the developers will be more than happy to contribute and leverage the testing solution built by the testing team as their own, which would lead to a team acceptance or acceptance of quality as a team objective and goal. Because now you're actually helping developers in cutting down their work of automation. Because now the developers can cross leverage your automation code to achieve their sprint objective or their definition of done, which is automate. Once you do all these things at the top of the top of the pyramid, you actually get a right pyramid structure, which helps you to minimize your testing effort, which helps you to capture the right data during your engineering practices, which helps you to share knowledge and tools, and help you to test early and reliably. I think the benefit which it gives you are tremendous. It helps you to create a more forward-looking team structure, testing strategy. It helps you to build more reliable and scalable automation. It helps you to create faster feedback time as you can run your API automation as part of a DevOps pipeline, brings in the culture of collective ownership, and enables you to achieve in-sprint automation, which was the objective you set out for from the very beginning.
Sure, Vikas. I think this looks to be a very detailed kind of approach, and and the benefits that it offers are immense. And I think the first foundation of this, as you rightly said, was test selection, and so you need to figure, as you right said, that we need to first find out so what to automate, what not to automate, kind of a thing. So what are some of your advice to the team? So what are the some of the do's and don'ts that you would recommend for the automation team? How do they do that? How do they do this?
So Rahul, this is one thing which I've been actually talking at a lot of conferences with my customers, with my teams for last 4 years, or in fact 5 years now, since the time started working on this concept of correlation ring. What I mean by correlation ring is if you look at our engineering practices and our post-production practices, the tool sets which we leverage or utilize, the entire engineering from right from a requirement gathering stage to post-production and monitoring, we have been using a lot of tools. All these tools are designed for a purpose to capture data. So all these tools capture a lot of useful data of how we build an application, how our customers use an application, what are the issues and challenges our customers are facing, and what is the improvement required. But I've hardly seen teams leveraging this data to identify what are the core modules the customer is actually utilizing, or how are they utilizing it, or what are the navigation paths a customer is following in their application, or what data a customer is entering, or from which media is the customer accessing their application. If you marry all of this data together, in what I call a correlation ring, and if you leverage data science and predictive analytics on top of it, it can truly identify and tell you what is the 20% of your application which is being leveraged by 80% of your consumers. That means what are those modules, those use cases which you need to focus on from a testing perspective or from an automation perspective. And that is what I've been telling and coaching teams. Identify this sweet spot and automate that sweet spot. Because if you do that, then you have a very manageable testing or regression suite which you can automate and leverage for your testing on and on every release, every build, which can truly deliver or help you deliver a more stable application. So that would be my advice to the team. Identify that sweet spot, leverage the data, leverage data science, and get the correlation from your data to identify what is that 20% which is leveraged by 80% of your users.
I think that's a very valuable advice. So if we are not hypothetically chasing automate everything, and if effort is focused on the 20% of the features that is valuable to 80% of the customers, so I think this would go down a long way in keeping the automation suite in place and the effort at the right place. That's a very valid point. And because so the 20% rule is, I think, applicable to everything that is related to computers. So I've seen, like, we have seen this 20% rule in bugs. We have seen this in 20% rule now in kind of testing. So this is a pretty good rule. So now that we know that, okay, we need to keep focus on the 20% rule, but how do we kind of measure our kind of if measure the ROI, because that is the one of the steps that you said. So we need to be in place of measuring the return that we get. And often project stakeholders often demand these matrices, and currently I see teams that are struggling. The teams struggle at multiple fronts. So I have two questions for you here, so we can go them one by one. My first question is, what metrics we should start to measure? Like when we talk about automation testing, what are the things that we should try to measure? And the next that I would like to know from you is, how do you measure them?
Correct. Thanks, Rahul. And I think I'll basically um, establish these matrices by giving an example from one of the big consulting assignments which I did a couple of years back. I think traditionally, or even not even traditionally, today even when you talk to any testing team, they would report you status in terms of number of test cases executed, number of test cases passed, number of test cases fail, number of defects identified by severity, by priority. These have been the standard metrics which has been shared years and over year by the testing team to the leadership. These matrices are fine and are important and should be reported, but what they fail to capture is the essence and value of automation. They fail to capture of essentially how did you achieve or arrive at that pass percentage. Now, coming back to the example which I was mentioning, in in 2008, 17 and 18, I did a consulting exercise for a very large, in fact, the leader in airline or the travel industry. They had 45,000 test cases automated, 100% automation, executed by a team of 52 people over a period of 1 month. So would you truly call that automation? In my perspective, I did not. And they reported the same metrics to leadership year on year after every sprint release. What they did not capture is what is your total build feedback time. If you get a build, in how much time you're able to respond, because they never share the data of what is the number of reruns or runs they are supposed to do to get to a certain pass percentage. That is the reason why I started initiating these five metrics with my teams, which we now measure. The first metrics in this is what is my first pass percentage. That is on any given new build, how many of my test cases, if executed, get passed in the very first instance. That truly tells me what is the stability level of my automation test suite. Plus, it enforces my team to work on these metrics, resolve failures, identify common causes of failures, and resolve them every time. So that if a test case is failing, it is failing only because there is an application issue. None of the test case should fail because of an automation code structure issue. The second matrix which we established was the parallel execution ratio. The need for this metrics is it helps me establish what is the maximum time I need to execute all my automation test cases. Because if I know what percentage of my test cases I can execute in parallel, the longest time is for my automation execution is the time taken by my longest running test case. So if I can execute all my test cases in parallel using multi-threading, I can run 100 parallel threads. Every thread can execute 10 test cases, and I can execute 1,000 test cases in parallel. The next metrics which we established was a total build feedback time. The build feedback time essentially means the time taken to start automation execution till the time we completed the analysis. Because this is where we started identifying what are the areas of efficiency improvement, how I can reduce my overall feedback time. And if you would notice, all these metrics which we're talking about feed to improve the next one or help improve the next one. The next metrics which we capture is the percentage of automation data generated automatically. That is percentage of automated test data generation. That what percentage of data which we are using for testing or automation can be generated automatically without relying on a pre-built data or pre-existing data. The advantage of this matrix is if I'm given a greenfield environment to test, can I build my own data and test on it without relying on someone to build data or provide me data? Because test data has been a perennial problem for testing. And finally, what percentage of my test cases I can execute in my DevOps pipeline? Because that would enforce my teams to adopt the right layer of technology to automate. Because then, if I have a higher percentage of test case executed in pipeline, that would mean that I have more reliable automation. That would also mean that I'm automating at the right technology layer because I can automate a lot more API driven test cases and integrate them as part of my pipeline. So, Rahul, these are the 5 metrics which we capture in all our projects to truly define a value mindset, a mindset to create value in an agile team.
Sure, Vikas. I think these all these matrices gave quite insights about how the build is progressing and where does our testing suite stand. And since they feedback to themselves, so they are kind of uh, like they are creating data themselves. So I think that's a pretty good way to go forward on this journey. So Vikas, I think the approach is pretty holistic approach. I completely agree with you on that. And keeping like automation testing in view, what is your final advice to the testing teams who are kind of branching onto this journey or who are seeing these challenges? Because if I look at the front to top to bottom, the approach is pretty kind of I think inclusive approach. How do they start? So
Great. So, Rahul, I'll limit my advice to only 3 points. I'll again reiterate what I started in the very beginning. Don't automate everything. Second, keep your automation tools and technology as close to the development teams as possible. Make them part of the journey, not someone sitting on the side while you're on this journey. And third, measure the value you're delivering. Also, communicate the value you're delivering. Be vocal about what you're delivering and how it is helping the teams to deliver a stable, reliable product. Be proud of being a tester on the team and be proud of the work you're doing.
sure, Vikas. I think in like you have been adding values to our kind of projects, and thanks for all of this kind of insightful advice. And to our listeners, I would say thanks for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as we enjoyed creating it. So every 2 weeks, we would come back with a new podcast where we would talk about another interesting topic. For now, goodbye and take care of yourself. Please subscribe to our podcast and provide us some feedback. Thank you.